My name is Peter Melton, and it's a joy to see you all here. It really warms my heart to have a nice crowd here to listen to this conversation about what's going on with our planet. We're going to have a moderator, and we're going to have 4 panelists, and we're going to have a conversation about what's going on. And it's our quest that this conversation will lead to a lot of participation from you guys. And what does it feel like for you? And what questions do you have about where we're headed on this planet? So, enough from me. We will hand it over to Rick Longinotti, who will be our moderator.
Hi, everybody. I see a lot of friendly, familiar faces out there. I started the local Santa Cruz desal alternatives. It's one of the fronts in our effort to stop climate change. The city and the local water district from SoCal, we're looking at a water supply solution that's 12 times as energy intensive as our current water supply. So thank you all for participating in that, and I think we've turned the corner on that particular one anyway. I'll tell you a little bit about what's going to happen today. So after introducing the folks, the guests are going to introduce themselves, and then I want to get a little bit idea of what you all want to hear from them so to help them shape their presentations. Then they each have a chance to present for 8 minutes or so, and then there will be questions, and then we'll be out of here by 5 o'clock today. So first of all, I want to introduce Dr. Guy McPherson, who is a professor emeritus in conservation biology at the University of Arizona. Guy, would you introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Rick. As Rick indicated, I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Arizona. Most people think emeritus means retired. In my case, it means left in despair and disgust. But it's almost the same thing. I'm pretty sure the Latin root is the same. Yeah, I do the climate change Grim Reaper comedy show. That's what somebody called it the other day. I was a radical teacher for 2 decades at the University of Arizona. I left at the age of 49 because it appeared industrial civilization was teetering on the brink. So I went and established a permaculture homestead in New Mexico, and I've been living there more than 5 years. And in that time, it has become abundantly clear that industrial civilization still teeters on the brink, but we have triggered 38 irreversible self-reinforcing feedback loops in that time, and now climate change is running the show. And so I'm trying to return to my roots, to what I am, and that's a teacher. And so now I go around and spread the good news that other people are generally unwilling to accept, much less talk about. So that'll get us started. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, guys. Next, Dr. Rick Nolthenius, the Planetary Science Professor at Cabrillo College and Chair of the Astronomy and Astrophysics Department. Rick?
Yeah, Rick Nolthenius. Actually, I run the astronomy program at Cabrillo College. Most of my research in astronomy is actually in cosmology, galaxy clustering, and so forth, but I have done some planetary stuff too. And lately I've been teaching a class called Planets and Climate, and then rechristened Planetary Climate Science. And I would encourage all of you to check the catalog and sign up. I teach it now every semester. It really is the most important science happening today, and that includes anything in cosmology.
I also teach at San Jose State in the Meteorology and Climate Department. Teach a big course on global climate change, and I've been teaching a course on the solutions to that, renewable energy, what I call sky power of the people, at Cabrillo since 2002. I worked at NASA Ames Research Center for years studying the ozone layer in the polar stratosphere, studying climate change, looking for planets around other stars, and actually also was involved, my first job there was taking flights on a flying observatory. Now you can imagine a great big dome with wings on. No, it was an airplane with a telescope mounted on board that it could actually, we could lower the temperature of the detector to the point where it could detect a match being struck at the distance of the moon, looking for things like stars being born in the far infrared light. But so lately, my thing has been, I've been teaching about problems like climate change and the ozone problem, which we do have an international agreement in place now that is helping to solve, but more importantly, the solutions, which is what I call the good parts, fun parts. We got gloom and doom maybe facing us, but we need to do whatever we can about it and hope that we can find a way out.
My field of study is actually the planet Mars and the climate of Mars and the possibility of life on Mars. I have I guess, personal interest in the issue of climate change, because we should all have a personal issue and interest in it. My postdoc, so I got my PhD at the University of Colorado in a program called astrogeophysics, which had a smattering of physics, astrophysics, planetary science, and terrestrial atmospheric science. And my first postdoc was with Steve Schneider, Dr. Steve Schneider, who was on the original IPCC, and at that time, at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, he published the first journal called Climate. And so I've been exposed to the science of climate change, but I can't say that I am a climate scientist.
So now we want to get an idea from you about what you came here for, what you would like to see happen. Maybe there might be some kind of sync between what you came here for and what they have to offer. I get the idea that you're here because of a deep concern about climate change. The title of this is Climate Crisis. Are we there yet? How many people think we're there yet? Raise your hand. Well, that's most of the people in the room. How about if you all think that we're there yet, then we've solved that problem. We could go home now. But what else would you like to hear about today? Can I hear from 2 or 3 people?
The feedback loops.
You want to hear about feedback loops. Okay? The guy mentioned that.
I'd like to know if it is just localized to planet Earth, or perhaps there's more going on in the solar system, shifting the sun.
Okay, so you want to know about, yes, that's enough. So you want to know about climate change here on Earth, whether it's connected to some kind of solar system activity. Yes.
Actionable legislation that we can get behind?
Actionable legislation that we can get behind. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. What we can do in general, yeah. So I hope you all got an idea of some of the things that people are interested in and can address that. So let's start with Guy McPherson, and you have about 8 minutes to present.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Gail and a host of others for organizing this event. If you want to find out more about what I'm up to, I'm doing a number of presentations in the area. You can find those at my website, guymcpherson.com, which is called Nature Bats Last. And you can also see a bunch of clips on YouTube of what I'm doing, and that's all at Nature Bats Last as well. And in those presentations, I really focus on the science. And Peter Melton, my host, organizer, and handler, says that I don't get to do science today, or no PowerPoint, or something. I don't know. I defer to Peter. So he says, you have to get up there and you have to look these people in the eye. That's not a direct quote. So I'm connecting with your people. I'm all heart today. Chad, it's a bleeding heart. So, Mike Tyson, who you know as the boxer, or moral philosopher, likes to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's the moral philosophy part. Well, we've been punching the planet in the face for a long time. Industrial civilization started nearly 200 years ago, and we've been punching and punching and punching away. And we've not only added a bunch of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, but we have driven to extinction some 200 species a day for the last many, many, many days. We have fouled the air and poisoned the water and washed the soil into the world's oceans, and I'm starting to sound like a real Debbie Downer now. Maybe I should shut up. So industrial civilization has been punched in the face many times, and people ask me all the time, why don't we have the same Earth I remember? Well, duh. As Tim Garrett pointed out in a paper written more than 7 years ago, subsequently published in the prestigious journal Climatic Change, only collapse of civilization prevents runaway climate change. And I don't see anybody voting for that. We want to know about carbon taxes and what are the civilized approaches we can take to turn this ship around. The science says there are none. Only collapse of industrial civilization prevents runaway climate change. We've known that for a long time. And abundant science, after Garrett's work was published in 2009, supports that idea. Civilization is a heat engine. As long as we maintain civilization, we heat up the planet. And it doesn't really matter if we're heating it up with derivatives of fossil fuels, like solar panels and wind turbines, which are not renewable in any sense or replacements, they're derivatives of fossil fuels. It doesn't really matter if we run this set of living arrangements with solar or wind or fossil fuels or some combination, it still means we overheat the planet. How fast? Well, Oliver Tickell pointed out in an article in The Guardian, now more than 6 years ago, that at 4 degrees centigrade, all we can plan for is extinction. And he was talking about human extinction. And he synthesized a bunch of evidence and concluded that 4C makes a lot of sense. Actually, I think that's pretty conservative because we've never had the humans on this planet at more than 3.5 C above baseline in the past, not even at 3.5 C above baseline. So we don't have to warm things very much to create a dead planet as far as we're concerned, to create a planet that doesn't have habitat for humans anymore. And it looks like we're headed that way relatively soon. A paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in February 2009 points out that the temperature associated with carbon dioxide currently in the atmosphere is irreversible for at least 1,000 years. A report put out by the Alliance of Small Island States for COP15 in Copenhagen in 2009 points out that the current level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere takes us to 6C warming. We aren't going to reduce the heat influence from the current level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for at least 1,000 years. And that means we're stuck, we're headed for 6C, and we're stuck there for at least 1,000 years. Remember, no humans on the planet at 3.5 C above baseline. So, all this looks pretty dire. Enough about carbon. It appears that methane has begun to play a significant role at this point. There are numerous journal articles, starting with geophysical research letters in 2009, indicating that methane is bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean. That's one of a handful of sources of methane being produced at a rapid and rapidly increasing level. Methane in the atmosphere is about 100 times more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide in the short term, meaning less than 20 years or so. And if we project out 100 years, it's maybe only 20 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And when it breaks down, of course, it breaks down into carbon dioxide. So there's no real solution there. As one of 38 self-reinforcing feedback loops, methane bubbling out of the Arctic Ocean leads to 6 degrees C by 2023 or so, according to Paul Beckwith, renowned authority, professor at the University of Ottawa, renowned authority on methane in the Arctic Ocean. That's one of 38 irreversible self-reinforcing feedback loops that I know about. Over time, most of us started paying attention in 2007 or so with Al Gore's movie and then book, indicating that we're heading for 1 degree C warmer planet by the end of the century. And in fact, the IPCC's fourth assessment, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's fourth assessment, which came out in 2007, indicated that we're probably headed for at least 1.8 C temperature increase above baseline by 2100. And that doesn't sound all that terrible. It's not that much warmer than today. Although a report from nearly a quarter of a century ago, put out by the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases, indicates that 1C is the Rubicon we shall not cross. That doing so produces rapid, nonlinear acceleration of climate change that will influence ecosystems. So 1.8 is a big deal. Since that series of projections came out in 2007, there have been a number of others. The most recent of those indicate, from the Hadley Center for Meteorological Research, 4 degrees C by 2060, and from the United Nations, up to 5C by 2050. So it looks like if we maintain the current course, we're headed for a tremendous amount of heat going into the atmosphere. And in fact, we've dumped so much heat into the oceans within the last couple of decades that the planet has been warming up quite substantially, even at current levels of carbon dioxide. And that's obviously liable to increase in the not too distant future. In fact, the IPCC, in their latest assessment, their vaunted 5th assessment, published earlier this year but heavily leaked starting in September of last year, indicates that global warming is irreversible without geoengineering. The IPCC, one of the more conservative bodies in the scientific world, says global warming is irreversible without fantasy technology that doesn't actually exist. Within 5 months, 5 papers came out in the referee journal literature indicating geoengineering will not help and might actually make things a lot worse. So I think that we're in really, really, really bad shape. And at this point, I'm not sure there's a heck of a lot we can do to turn the ship around. I think the ship already hit the iceberg, and the ship is going down. And at this point, maybe only a little part of this ship is still sticking up. But I'd love to be convinced otherwise by the panelists who follow in my wake. That's enough for right now, and we'll be back to the sunset. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And thanks for the kind applause. We don't want to kill the messenger. Okay, so next will be Rick Nolthenius.
I don't like to disagree in any form with that honored guest, but I'm a little more optimistic than that. So near-term human extinction has been a theme for some, and that includes Guy McPherson. Human extinction in 20, 30, 40 years. So let's look at how supportable that is. So one of the pieces of evidence that's been brought is this graph from the Arctic News blog. It's a blog site, not a science site per se. Sam Karana, who's not a scientist, I'm not actually sure what his background is, but he created this polynomial fit to temperatures. So what you'll notice is the temperatures, they go up, and then they kind of go down a little bit. Turns out that looks like it was caused by all the pollution we put into the air in the 50s and 60s, which actually blocks sunlight, that sulfates will reflect sunlight. And then it started going up again. Now, if you just draw a polynomial to that, you can get that to go anywhere you want. In fact, if you just add another term to the polynomial, instead of, let's say, a 5th degree, you make it a 6th degree, you could get it to turn around and dive down. You really can't trust that fit anything beyond the range of the data. So you need the physics in there. There's no physics that supports a polynomial fit. There's dangers to extrapolation. So I thought this one was pretty cute that I found. Number of husbands, yes. Well, parade on wedding cake. So you might say, well, okay, but maybe it is physically reasonable that all these positive feedbacks that we may be triggering the so-called methane clathrate gun, which will cause abrupt climate change. We're not talking about a gradual warming, although that's still very rapid compared to geologic times, but gradual, but an actual ramp up. Methane clathrates have been brought up a lot in the near-term human extinction community. But the thing is, they're only stable at very high pressures, pressures far below the level of the Arctic Ocean floor. And those are just not going to be able to warm up that quickly. It takes time for heat to percolate in and to let that come back out. We have seen an increase in methane. But we don't see any evidence in the paleo record of clathrate destabilization, even during times in the last 200,000 years when the Arctic was warmer than it is now. We do see increasing methane, but we don't see disaster, not near term. What about the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, often brought up? Clathrate destabilization possible there, but it would take roughly 2,000 years, according to careful climate studies, for heating to reach and destabilize the clathrates at their stability depth. 2,000 years is pretty short in the geologic record. When you go back 55 million years, it can look like a spike. But it's not 20 years, not 50 years, 2,000 years.
Rick, explain MA there.
Oh, a million years ago, is their abbreviation. And Permian extinction, that was really dramatic. That was 250 million years ago. We don't really know what caused that. Clathrates may well have been part of it. Methane does oxidize into CO2 and water vapor. The half-life of that is about 9 years. If you really want the methane apocalypse in short term, then you need to get massive amounts of methane in the atmosphere in timescales short compared to this. How much is there in the atmosphere now? Well, there's only one, methane is only 1/250th of the concentration of CO2 atom per atom, or molecule per molecule. So the claim that there's no question we've triggered the methane clathrate gun is just not supported by the evidence. We do see rising methane, but it looks like it's actually more gentle lately than is the CO2 rise. The green curve is the methane, the red is CO2. Here's methane, or here's methane for the last 20 years, so this is getting pretty recent, 30 years. And you can see it's kind of gentled out, and now it looks like it's starting to go back up again. Is this the methane bomb going off? Well, more likely it's due to an accelerating population of ruminants, and also fracking, which is now really big. And there's, anybody else want to add to that? I mean, I'm totally on board with that. Tons, lots of methane being leaked just from the petroleum industry. They try and cover it up, but it's there. And also from Arctic lakes, which is another subject altogether. But look at the ruminants here, the blue curve, and that's been going up quite a bit. Well, the methane curve has been gentling out. Now, they do end this curve right before the methane starts to go back up again, but it's only going up at the slope that you see in the earlier part of the graph. It's not yet looking like a bomb. Lots of dramatic YouTube videos from the University of Alaska on setting a fire, the methane coming from lakes, Arctic lakes. Okay, so there is methane in those bottom of those Arctic lakes, but how much is there? How much is going to go off like right away? That's not clear. Much talk about positive feedback. Self-reinforcing amplifying feedbacks is a term that Guy and others like to use. Positive feedbacks, I guess, sounds a little too optimistic, but when a mathematician uses the word positive feedback, it actually means not such a great thing in this case. You have to realize that. But you have to model these correctly, okay? You can't just say there's a positive feedback and therefore we accelerate to doom immediately. For example, as the Arctic Ocean ice goes away, well then, for each additional loss of ice, there's less that can go into that positive feedback coefficient. You really have to put in the right math to see what it will do. Climate scientists can do this. Greenland is darkening, but it's only going to get so dark. We do have new fresh snow that comes every winter. You just can't assume that every positive feedback takes you to infinite doom over a short time. You really got to do the proper modeling. That hasn't been done. I'm going to officially call, I guess this is going to go on YouTube at some point, I would love to see the many fine, good, quality, brilliant scientists in the IPCC that issue a parallel statement, divorce themselves from the UN so they don't need a sign-off on government officials from the biggest carbon polluters in the world, and they don't need sign-offs from volunteers. And they can just issue it straight, because I read the original papers, and they are more gloomy than the official pronouncements. They're Official pronouncements are very watered down, unfortunately. It's very unfortunate. Something else you should realize is that over geologic time, CO2 has been much higher. On average, CO2 levels have been dropping, I guess in this direction, and go this way. So there's today at the far left, and for the last 50, 100 million years, CO2 levels have been much higher. So we don't see a Venus syndrome. This is another thing that's been brought up in the near-term human extinction camp, is this idea that the habitable zone for solar systems is saying that we're just 1% away from certain doom. Okay, sounds pretty scary. The graph does look pretty scary. There's the Earth and the blue dot there, and there's the edge of the habitable zone, pretty close. But this paper was actually meant as a conservative, a very conservative, let's narrow the habitable zone in searching for planets around other main sequence stars in the galaxy. So for this, they use a simple one-dimensional climate model, and this is the most important part. It's a cloud-free planet. There's no clouds on these planets. Now at the near edge, clouds act as a coolant. They're bright, they're white, they reflect sunlight. And the authors themselves, in the abstract, and of course even more in the later parts of this paper, will qualify and tell you that those habitable zones are much wider if you would apply it to a realistic planet like the Earth. We haven't had a Venus syndrome, and all the climate scientists, the reputable ones, really any of them that I know, are saying no, we're not going to have a Venus syndrome. There was some uncertainty there with James Hansen for a little while, but I think even he's back. He's pulled himself back from the brink on that. Okay, so you've just heard, well, humans have never lived in a 3.5 degree centigrade world above the pre-industrial. It's true, but the reason is because back when the world was that hot, and it has been that hot in the past, humans hadn't evolved yet. So it's kind of a misleading statement. Another claim, 440 nuclear reactors around the world will all go meltdown with societal collapse. Maybe. We'd like to think that, I mean, they can be saved. They can be put in a safe mode. We'd like to think when things start going bad, we will try to look out for that. It's an assumption. Okay, the ocean acidification, that is bad. Many of the species that exist in the ocean are dying and won't be able to survive, but you know what? Not all species are made of aragonite. It is aragonite that is on the ragged edge of acidifying away. Many species that use calcium carbonate use calcite, which is much tougher and is not endangered. Other species will take over. The whole ocean is not going to die. There'll be a population crash, and new species will occupy the ecological niches. It'll be bad. Okay, I'm not denying that, but not total death. Claims the sea level rise of 10 millimeters per year is tripling the past rate, so you imagine, oh my God, sea level is doing this like right now. But now let's actually look at the graph. Sorry for the poor resolution. But you see that was preceded by a time when sea level dropped. And basically what was happening was the El Nino, La Nina oscillation was taking water from the ocean, putting it into the clouds, dumping it onto the continents where it ended up in reservoirs and ice and rivers, and only slowly came back to the sea where it then re-raised sea levels. There's definitely a trend there, but we're really not significantly above the trend that we had before. You just have to put it all in the right context. Now here's another issue that's a little more emotional. So many biologists are emotionally committed to seeing the destruction of society as payback for our wanton destruction of innocent other species. And indeed, correctly, we are in the 6th great mass extinction right now. Half of all species or more are predicted to be gone by mid-century or maybe a little later. So I sympathize with the feeling. I really do. I genuinely do. I feel anger, sadness. I go through the whole thing every day. I sympathize with the feeling. But the reality is, if that's really what you're wishing for, it's the innocents who are going to die. It's the innocents who are going to suffer. Like the son of my teaching assistant here, who everybody loves. And my grandniece on her first day at kindergarten. That has got to be the most adorable picture ever in the history of the world. Yes? I mean, I can't imagine. These people are not going to suffer so much. Everybody know who these are? The Koch brothers. We are coked out of our brains.
Things go worse with Coke.
Yes. Okay, so maybe, I don't think we are headed for abrupt climate change. I think things are going to slowly get worse. Slowly meaning, you know, sort of pretty darn rapid geologically, but slow compared to human timescales. Not much worse than the rate at which we're seeing now. Rapid, you know, accelerating, but not, I don't think we're all going to die.
I'm going to start off with, we got all this science and it's great and it's really important, but hey, I'm a betting man, okay? I'm going to lay down the gauntlet right now. I'm going to challenge Guy McPherson. I won't put him on the spot. We'll do this over dinner and a beer later, but I'm going to bet. I'm going to offer to bet $1,000 on his claim that the human race is going to be toast, i.e. extinct by the year 2030. I'll even give him till 2040. Another decade, just in case he's a decade off. Now, think about it. The good thing about this bet is if I lose, guess what? I don't have to pay. We won't be around, okay? If I win, and he and I are both healthy enough to still be around in 15 years, I sure hope so. He looks pretty healthy. He looks healthier than I do. Anyway, then hey, I'm going to get rich quick. Most of you probably know about TED Talks, TED. It stands for Technology, Entertainment, Design. Some of you, I'm sure, have seen this TED Talk that I gave on energy and the future of the world, but I'll bet you at least half of you haven't. I'm not going to show you the whole TED Talk. It's only 12 minutes. There's 3 key minutes that are a perfect response to what has gone before.
Now, I've got a big, kind of heavy question for you today. Are we going to make it as a species on the Earth for much longer? Might be kind of a cliffhanger. Seems like we're sort of heading into a perfect storm right now. But in the SETI research community, S-E-T-I, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, the question arises, okay, where are they? How come we haven't been hearing from anybody else out there? Well, some people will tell you, well, it's just because we don't yet have sophisticated enough technology or extensive enough sky coverage yet to have been picking up signals. But others say, well, you know, intelligent civilizations with powerful technologies are really pretty rare out there in the cosmos. Or they just don't last very long. They inevitably blow themselves up or pollute themselves out of existence or run out of resources or succumb to plagues or some damn thing. Nervous laughter for our future. Now we do know of ancient civilizations on this planet that flourished for a while and then vanished. But now think about it. Global collapse. Could that be our fate? All right, now look, in the really long run, in the cosmic perspective, there is one thing that's certain, and it's not pretty. Starting in about 1 billion years, the sun is going to go red giant, swallowing the planets Mercury and Venus and vaporizing our oceans. Well, ouch! You know, I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but could that be a case of too much solar energy? And serious global warming, by the way. But hey, that's 1 billion years from now. Not 1 million, but 1,000 million. Oh, whew, what a relief. Okay, so, but we are going to have to concentrate on getting through these next tens and hundreds of years. How are we going to do that? Nobody's figured it all out. But there is one great truth. Really good news that you can count on. Any truly advanced civilization of intelligent life here on Earth will have as its key signature that it runs on the sun. Why is this such good news? Energy, as the way we do it today, is the largest and most polluting industry in the world. But the sun is by far the dominant source of energy on the planet, completely dwarfing the sum total of everything we will ever get from oil, coal, natural gas, and uranium combined. You never hear this. It's the best kept secret in the world, but here it is. Take a look at that big cube there. That's the annual total solar energy input to the Earth. And you see that little tiny cube down in the lower right? That's the annual total energy usage by all of civilization. And those other sort of largish dark boxes, those aren't the annual energy supplies from the fossil and fissile fuels. Those are the total remaining reserves left in the ground. So hey, this picture is kind of like manna from heaven. And especially if you're interested in lots of really great new jobs where people can make a good living, helping make a difference for a better world, there's good news here, and lots of it.
So I thought I would answer a couple questions that came into my mind of things other people said that I believe some people might have gone past them. What are they talking about? Geoengineering. What is geoengineering? So geoengineering in the IPCC report is as simple as plant trees. Sequester carbon for carbon sources that are burning. Again, TBD. How you do that is not really explained, but plant trees, everybody can understand how to do that. There have been a number of sort of various fetched ideas for how to do geoengineering, all the way from the most far-fetched one I've heard of, which was actually popularized by some people who work in my same place at NASA. Put mirrors in space, essentially reflect some of that huge amount of sunlight that's falling on the surface of the Earth that Joe just mentioned, back to space so it doesn't fall on our planet. Well, okay. It's well known that certain big eruptions, like Mount Vesuvius, Mount Pinatubo, put aerosols into the stratosphere, sulfur aerosols in particular, and those actually reflect sunlight pretty well. So we could deliberately put aerosols into the stratosphere. There are schemes for doing things that just increase the cloudiness of the planets. So clouds reflect sunlight back to space. They're very efficient at doing that. We just have a cloudier planet, then we can mitigate some of this effect. So that's what the sort of the spectrum of geoengineering. That's what it's about. Another one that came up is Venus syndrome. What is the Venus syndrome? I believe what's being referred to is in early solar system history, Venus and Earth probably both had oceans. This is when the sun was not as bright as it is now. The early sun was fainter than it is now. As the sun luminosity increased, eventually Venus was not in the habitable zone, and so the oceans on Venus evaporated. And so it turns out that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, so is water vapor. Water vapor is actually a much stronger greenhouse gas than is carbon dioxide. If you put a lot more water vapor into the atmosphere, you really can make a huge increase in the warming. And that is what Venus syndrome is. It's essentially evaporating the oceans. Is there a chance we're going to evaporate the oceans on Earth? No, that's not going to happen. Somebody asked the question over here, is this something to do with the sun? Is it solar system wide? No. Human intervention, human impact has been on our own planet. We've had very minor impact on any of the other planets in our solar system. And so this is something we brought on ourselves by our own behavior. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with the sun. One other one that I thought came up, which I think should probably be our main topic of conversation here, is can we mitigate this effect without destroying our economy? I believe that the answer is yes. I think Joe showed the answer of how we do that. We use the sun. Instead of using the carbon that, the sun is actually what produced all this carbon that we are using. The sun is what gave us the oil deposits and gave us the carboniferous and gave us the coal deposits and gave us, it's basically millennia and millions of years of solar energy that are essentially in the ground now, and we are burning them over time scales of, you know, a few decades. And we're actually fortunate that we're running out of these resources at a pretty fast rate. But as a result of what the fact that we're running out, we're going to more and more extreme measures, like fracking, to get the last bit of carbon out of the ground, where it would be a lot more intelligent to just make better use of the sun. And I think that's all I really have to say.
So the next part, we're going to invite the panel to come up on the stage here and answer questions. But I wonder if, Carol, if you would just, you explained what geoengineering was, the different ideas, but could you give your views about those ideas?
I'm very, I believe that geoengineering, so the IPCC report, which really is advocating a particular strategy. And that strategy is to keep the amount of global warming by 2100 to 2 degrees centigrade. That is still not fixing the problem. There is no short-term fix for the problem. I agree with that. 2 degrees centigrade is still substantial global warming. It's going to have substantial negative consequences on the human race. There's going to be a lot of extreme weather events. There's going to be a lot of drought. There's going to be a lot of potential starvation. Those are the real consequences we're facing. If we get on a different curve and we're going to the 6 degrees centigrade warming, then it's going to be a lot worse. So we should be doing everything we can to stay on the 2 degrees C curve. My own view is that geoengineering is under-considered as a solution, and that at the very least we should be studying. I mean, I can tell you that there is no funding, no federal funding whatsoever going into geoengineering research, and that is wrong. In my opinion, it should become a high priority, very high priority. Yes. To at least study how we might mitigate climate change.
Naomi Klein just came out with a new book. It's called This Changes Everything. And its subtitle, I think, is Capitalism and Climate Change. And in it she says, our economic system and our planetary system are now at war. Or more accurately, our economy is at war with many forms of life on Earth, including human life. Can we solve our climate problem without a drastic overhaul of our economy?
I don't see anybody who thinks collapse of industrial civilization is a good idea, except me and a handful of other people. And I think it's a good idea because it would then prevent us from driving 150 to 200 species to extinction every day. Not to mention the human population overshoot at the rate of more than 200,000 people a day added to the planet, and on and on. All of these predicaments, they're not problems, they're predicaments, there's no solution. All of these predicaments are rooted in civilization. So, of course, there's going to be economic impacts. We have to stop the whole thing. And when that happens, as work by James Hansen points out, we add an additional 1.2 C in a matter of days. 0.85 plus 1.2, oops, people are still aiming for 2 degrees. It's over, it's done. Even collapse takes us to 2 C in a short period of time. So the only way to prevent one-way greenhouse, terminate industrial civilization. But terminating industrial civilization leads to the much vaunted 2C that we've been worried about that's a political target that leads to all these other self-reinforcing feedback loops.
We need an economy where we actually pay the real cost for things. See, the problem with capitalism as it is now is, it's corporate welfare, the way we do it. We're not paying the real cost for carbon, and now here we go. Here's an invitation and challenge to all of you. There's an organization that is kicking ass nationally and internationally succeeding in British Columbia the way we need to do here. It's called Citizens Climate Lobby. Citizensclimatelobby.org. Several of us in the room, we've been growing the chapter here locally. It's been growing by leaps and bounds nationally, and here's what they're up to. It's, just to make it short, we could call it a carbon tax, but it's not really a tax. It's called fee and dividend because what happens is at the mine or the wellhead, wherever you extract carbon in the economy, the industries that do that pay more. And of course, they're then going to pass those costs on to us, the consumers, but it'll be a negative incentive for carbon-intensive activities and purchases, and it'll be a positive incentive for clean energy, such as sky power to the people.
I would say the answer to your question is no. There's no way that we can hope to deal with this with the present mindsets that we have towards economy. I'm at least partially, more or less on board with Guy on that. We need massive change in our thinking about what human happiness and human welfare really is. As long as we're just trying to grub, we'll do conservation here, and we'll just take it, we'll put it over here. And the whole mindset of basically trying to maximize everything and outcompete each other is really a fatal mindset, I think. Right now, people are able to pollute without paying for it. We're using our atmosphere and our oceans as an open sewer. If we instead had a tax, not the kind of one that they're proposing right now, which is $6 a ton or something ridiculous, but something like maybe $200 or $300 a ton, then all of a sudden you guys would see, whoa, my gas bill just went up enormously. Well, but you know what, bikes aren't that much more expensive, and maybe I should buy a bike. You know, my running shoes aren't that much more. Maybe I should buy some running shoes. And you would get a check in the mail every month that would compensate at least partly for that tax. The beautiful thing about that is it would get everybody on board, because right now it's only, oh well, some smart people somewhere are going to take care of it for us. And that just isn't going to work.
The economy of California is like the 12th largest economy in the world. And California has cap and trade. How's that working?
I'm not a big fan of cap and trade. It's just too damn complicated. It's too easy to game the system.
And the dividend is you have the right to pollute, but you guys get to trade around and pay for that.
Yeah, so we do have that in this state, and unfortunately, so many people spent so long developing it that there's real political resistance to the carbon tax, the carbon fee and dividend. The Citizens Climate Lobby faces major opposition from environmentalists who are into cap and trade. They've just invested everything in that mentally, and they don't want to give up on it. It's their baby. So, you know, people got to get over it and realize what's better. So anyway, that's a fight that's going to have to be had.
The article by Al Gore in Rolling Stone, of all things, and I think it's from last month, and it's actually an excellent article, talking about the changes in the global economy that are going on for the simple reason that the cost of producing solar energy is going down. And in fact, a lot of what is causing certain people, I think the Koch brothers were mentioned, to invest so heavily in climate change denial is that they are getting stranded. The carbon economies are actually becoming less economically advantaged compared to solar. So it is in fact the cost, the declining cost of using solar energy that is probably going to make the difference. It's going to take the capitalist economy coming to a way to make money on it, to change, to make it really change.
If the carbon tax, you know, is being proposed as you know, one of your most effective ideas for, but we need a carbon tax that's, you know, hundreds of times greater than the one that's being talked about, and that's politically not viable. What steps do we need to take politically then?
For the first time, just this last year, there are organizations that are, you know, like 350.org. There are organizations who are taking this on as their #1 issue. Earth Day in 1970, within a year, like 3 years, there was Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. There were, you know, 5, 6, 7 major pieces of legislation passed under Richard Nixon. There really hasn't been enough pressure applied to the political, the political process is, as everyone knows, it's absolutely ground to a halt, and there hasn't been enough pressure applied on the part of the citizenry to get it moving again. And that pressure has got to come from the people. The people, and I think it's a good thing that people are starting to wake up and realize this is real and it's going to affect me and my kids. And we have to do something.
This Princeton study that came out this year that showed that we're really not a democracy, very sobering. I just don't think writing your congressman is the answer. I think my idea is identify somebody in every single congressional district, Senate, House, somebody who would be willing to make this a single issue next election, that they will pass a very stiff fee and dividend carbon tax. Our choices for the future, disastrous or catastrophic. So which do you want? I'm really not optimistic. In some sense, I have to thank Guy McPherson, because until Guy came, I was the doom and gloomer around here. Now I'm Pollyanna. Because if you would put the IPCC here and certain death and 50 years over here, I would be on that side of the IPCC. There's political reasons why why there's reason to think the IPCC, at least our official pronouncements, are not really as dire as they should be. And hopefully the progress is going to be made that way.
This is very interesting to me as a therapist, that we have doom and gloomers who have motivation. There's something going on here that has been worked through psychologically speaking, getting the bad news and then somehow working through that and still having the motivation to speak, to act, to be committed with every breath. And I wonder if people in the audience could join the panel in saying, well, how does that work for you? I mean, I see Jack Nelson he's another doom and gloomer with more energy than I've ever seen. So I'd like to hear from the panel or from members of the audience. What is it that gets you out there and doing stuff? Jack, can you come up here?
Hi, I'm Jack Nelson. I'm a member of Citizens Climate Lobby that Joe mentioned. Good organization, so check it out. I've got a book with me that I think is instructive. It was 50 years ago today, more or less, that The Hungry Planet was published. The author is George Borgstrom, and he presents agricultural, physics, land area, water supply, a whole range of factors in which, in this book, he pretty much locks up the concept that within 50 years, we're doomed to famine. In fact, the subtitle of the book is The Modern World at the Edge of Famine. And below that it says, a leading scientist measures today's hunger gap and the prospects for mass starvation in all world population areas within 50 years. So, some of the way that we did not end up in total global famine at this point are measures that we took that have dug our carbon hole deeper. So this problem is not totally fixed, and there are hungry people in the world today. But we are not all starving. It's because human beings are creative and come up with solutions that we don't see. When this book was written, answers to this problem were not visible, but we have since found. So I understand and I'm on the same page pretty much as Dr. Nolthenius about climate being a very serious problem. But the answers are going to be found by us getting busy. There are scientific answers and there are political answers. All of us in this room can at least participate in the political answers.
So this is a question for Guy McPherson. Do you think a global pandemic would be enough to stop climate change? Because are we due for one?
I love it when I'm the most Pollyanna person in the room. Go infectious disease.
We're kind of due for it, right?
Well, that certainly would reduce the human population. Would it be sufficient to allow for our own survival? Would it terminate industrial civilization? Maybe. We don't know. But, most people think that the threat is distant. It's off in the distance somewhere and something we need to work on for gradual change. but only collapse prevents runaway climate change, as we've known for 7 years. And 5 million people a year die early deaths because of climate change. It isn't us yet, but I guarantee you that for the families of those 5 million, it's catastrophic. And it's been catastrophic for a while.
Yes.
And we think, oh, it's something we need to worry about because of the grandchildren. Guess what? We're the grandchildren. We're all grown up now.
People learn the hard way. And when we learn the hard way with climate, unfortunately, it's already way too late. And I agree with Guy, I don't see really anything much happening now. But here's another thought that hasn't been brought up at all. What about all those third world countries? They want their time in the sun too. And we're trying to tell them, darn, you know, the party's over. Sorry, we kind of ate all the cake and there's none left for you because we can't afford to. They don't like that message, and they've been telling us that loudly.
You can never go wrong with more, lots more, of two things. Research on all kinds of things to find out better how the world works, the universe, the earth, people, and education.
Why haven't we done anything for over 100 years when we knew that we had global warming? That's my big question.
Anybody want to respond?
Rational intelligence doesn't.
Well, one quick answer was very few people knew there was global warming 100 years ago. It's starting to pick up as of the 50s or 60s. You started to see some sort of mainstream sources talking about it. So we haven't quite had 100 years, but yeah, it's been a long time. And one reason we haven't done it is that the media and people's minds are dominated by great big powers that be. And so that's, again, relating to what I'm talking about. Ground up grassroots movement to change consciousness and knowledge is something super important.
Nate Higgins is somebody I like to see on YouTube. He's a good thinker and has a lot of experience. And he makes the point that we grew up as a species in the Pleistocene, times of tough conditions. And we learned to think short term. You don't store away food for a future 20 years away. You worry about, knocking down that mastodon like right now, today. And that got hardwired into our brain, and we're still a very young species, and we still seem to operate that way. So breaking that, when I think about that, that's kind of depressing, because I don't personally think that way, and I now know many fine people who don't, but yet that haunts me. I worry that there are just not enough noble people in the world. That brings up just one last point I wanted to make, and that is, it's wonderful all that you might do individually to cut your carbon footprint. There's just not enough of you in the world to make a difference. There really isn't. It's got to be everybody. It's got to be political.
I want to thank very much our panelists. Could we please give them a hand? That's a pretty enthusiastic applause for some people that have heard some very difficult news. So give yourselves a hand too.
Keep up the good work.
Earth at Risk Conference, San Francisco in November. Guys on the panel.